Welcome to the Hunt Test Hobo podcast, your place for truckside chats and insights into the retriever game. Whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned handler, this podcast is another resource for tips, tricks, and insights from both the amateurs and professional trainers' perspectives. Each week, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of retriever training, sharing stories of success, overcoming challenges, and forging stronger bonds with our dogs. This is the Hunt Test Hobo podcast. I'm Chris Rudd, your host, fellow retriever enthusiast, and student of the game. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of the Hunt Test Hobo podcast. I am really thrilled and honored to have Mike Gibson, in my opinion, one of the best or the best amateur trainer that is in kind of the hunt test and field trial game that I know of. So I'm very excited to have Mike on this podcast. I've been planning having Mike on since the first time I decided to do this podcast. I was like, at some point we're going to have Mike on. So Mike, thank you for joining me.
Chris, thank you. Those are kind words. So,
well, I was trying to think about it, and I feel embarrassed that I don't know this, but have you had 3 different dogs win the Crown or 4?
I have had 4 different dogs win the Crown. I've won the Crown 5 times with 4 different dogs.
Okay, that's right. And it was your young dog Shady? Is that the one that I was missing?
Shady. Shady is the one dog that I won with. The very first one that I won the Crown with back in 2009.
Awesome. And you've kind of played the gamut on colors, so I think you've proved that maybe color doesn't matter, or does it?
Well, I don't know that it does. You know, I hear that all the time. I remember one time when, and I think it was Lyle. This was back in the day when the pros and the AMs were split, but it didn't change how the game was run. So, only 12 dogs made the semifinals, and it's 12 period. Doesn't matter whether it was 12 pro or 12 AM. It's 12 period. And we were lined up taking a photo shot for the semifinals, and you look down that lineup, and there was 12 dogs there, and there was only one that wasn't black, and it was Jeter. Lyle made the comment, Mike, whatever you do, don't let him look in the mirror. He doesn't know he's not black. So, but
that's good stuff. And then your last dog, Blaze, was a yellow dog. So I mean, you got it done with 2 blacks, chocolate, and a yellow. So
that's correct. So God's really blessed me with putting some good animals in my life. So they make me look good sometimes.
Well, we're gonna jump into talking about drills here in a little bit, but before we do that, Mike, for folks who don't know who you are, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, how you got into dogs, and then we'll jump into talking about drills.
Okay. Again, Mike Gibson, and I'm from a little small town in southeast Kansas. Watched my first SRS on TV way back in the day when it was the ESPN Great Outdoor Games, and thought, man, that would really be cool to have a dog to be able to play at that level. And going back a step further, been a hunter and an outdoorsman my whole life. Played college baseball, and at the tail end of my sophomore season, my dad suddenly passed away with a heart attack, and we never got a lab as a kid growing up. We just couldn't afford one, and I got $1,200 from Social Security when my dad passed away, and decided I'm gonna buy a started lab. Well, looking back at it now, I don't even think I could explain to you what a started lab was, and we didn't have social media like we have now. The internet didn't exist. Cell phones didn't even exist, believe it or not, at that time. And I was scrounging through an old Field and Stream magazine and found an ad of a kennel up in Minnesota, and they didn't have anything, but they pointed me to a pro trainer up there, a gentleman by the name of Dan Sales, and I contacted Dan and told him I would like to buy a started dog and how much money I had to play with, and myself and my girlfriend at the time, who's now been my wife of 38 years, and my mom, we loaded up in the pickup truck and we drove to Minnesota and brought home a dog, and that's where it all began. I used to even hide that dog out. We had an extra room underneath the stadium, and the groundskeeper helped me hide that dog out, for a while at the beginning of my junior year of college, and he helped me hide that dog out, and I was able to keep it for a few months before Coach found out about it, and I had to make other arrangements, uh, I went watched. I thought I had a good dog. There was no information like there is now. Programs like yours. There's lots of them out there now, and it really, really helps guys like me I don't have the. I just live in an area where there's no pro. I don't go train with a pro every day or any time for that matter. And so, we have to hustle for all the information we can possibly get to try to make ourselves competitive enough to play at that level. And so, the rest is the rest. I went and watched a master hunt test, never seen a field trial, never seen a hunt test. Decided to go. I drove to near Tulsa to watch a hunt test, and I saw a master test, and I thought, well, I just thought I had a good dog. My dog can't do that. I had to be honest. My dog can't do that, but I want a dog that can do that. So that's where it all began. Began just delving into it and gathering all the information I could do and training and being creative and trying to figure out how to do it. So been a labor of love ever since.
And I heard you talk about this, I think, on the Super Retriever Series podcast, that you played baseball in college.
Yes.
Where
Yes.
was that, and what position?
I played at Oral Roberts in Tulsa, and I played shortstop and second base on teams that were perennially in the top five in the nation.
Wow.
So
I feel that, like, most of the people that I've seen have success, maybe not most, but quite a few people that have had success in, like, the Super Retriever Series or just anything, that they were competitive at something before the dog game, and it was just that competitive nature of, like, I don't know, is it seeking perfection or whatever that is? It's just
well,
that just seems to be something that I see a lot.
I think that and I don't think being an athlete's a prerequisite to being a good dog trainer, but I will say this, that I think being an athlete at a high level, um, there's a reason that people are there, and it's not just because of their talent. There are an awful lot of talented people, in all different facets of life, not just athletics. But to do something with that, you have to have an inner drive that says, I want to be as good as I can possibly be, or I want to be the best player on the field or the best player on the court. And so, you put in countless hours of practice that nobody sees on your own time, to get better at what you do. And I think that just translates over, that discipline and that drive translates over into this just perfectly, because, you it's, you can't just casually do it and be good at it. You have to really, really immerse yourself into it, and really, 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 and if you don't really love it, you're just not going to do it and stick with it like that. So you really have to love it also.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we transition into drill work, I'm sure that it'll become apparent with how much drill work you do. But before we jump into that, I wanted to ask you, what was it exactly? It was something along the lines of, oh yeah, how much, like, training are you actually doing? Like, I'd say in May, June, when, like, kind of right in the heat of all of this, like,
Yeah.
how many sets are you? Because I know some amateurs, they can get more sets in than pros, and some amateurs can't get as many as a pro in. So I'm just curious, like,
Yeah.
how much work are you doing on the average week?
Oh, I'm doing a lot. I typically, for me, Chris, I use that summertime to really take what I think are my dog's biggest weaknesses, and I really point my finger at them and really try to do some things to make some big improvements there. And as you know, in this game, balance is the key. And if we would have a competition in the middle of all that, we probably wouldn't fare very well, because anytime we point our finger at a particular area, other parts of the game erode. And
Yeah.
And so, now for the Super Retriever Series, because a lot of it has been planned to try to be around other events and things like that. There are several competitions. Habitat Flats comes to mind. It's in middle of the latter part of June, which in this part of the country it's extremely hot that time of year. And so, we have to be very careful about how we go about what we're doing, because, the dogs will not quit on us. We've got to protect them, because they'll go till they drop. And we certainly don't want that to happen. Um, so I'm still doing an awful lot of work on things, but I'm usually on an advanced dog, say like Blaze is, where I'm at with him right now. I'm breaking some things down that I think he really needs to be better at, and trying to really make a concerted effort to get better at that. And then as the fall approaches and we start gearing up for fall competition season and we start gearing up for the Crown, I try to start putting things back together and start putting that balance back in there, and what have you. So I'm really attacking it pretty good in May and June. I just have to be a little smarter and a little wiser about times of the day that we're doing things.
So maybe I'll ask this in even a broader sense. Like, what does your year look like, and how does your focus change throughout the seasons?
You know, I'm a hunter and I hunt my dogs. So during hunting season, we're not training quite as often, and when we're hunting. And another thing that affects us is time change. I'm not retired yet, and so I have an office job where I'm in the office from generally 7:30, 7:45 every day, and until 5 o'clock. So there's going to come a time coming up here pretty quick when it's dark when I go to the office. It's dark when I come home from the office, and I'm trying to hunt on the weekends. So training starts to get a lot tougher. During those times, I may be taking the dogs with me to work. And I'm training. I'm finding a park. I'm finding somewhere where I can continue to do something with them, and that allows me to really, really. I don't want to say bond, because I really, these dogs are my dogs, and I've been bonding with them since they were 6 weeks old. But you really spend a lot of time with your dog, and you start to understand their little nuances and their little mannerisms that says, "Hey, I got it," or "I don't have it," or "I'm confused," and so all this drill, and those are drills. Obviously I can't go to a local park and set up launchers and do things like that. So
Yeah,
most of the time it's working on blinds, and it's working on poison bird blinds, and it's doing things like remote sits, remote sins and stuff. Trying to be creative to where we can get something done rather than get nothing done, even though we just have a short amount of time. And knowing that I can't do anything of an evening and I can't do anything of a morning, and so it's be creative with what I can do on my lunch break, because that's the only daylight hours of the day I can have a chance to do something. So
yeah,
that would be your fall winter time, any time. And again, it's I don't want to make this sound like my success has all been just for me. I do take advantage of pros. I've sent my dogs off, especially when I'm trying to build a dog to that advanced level. And again, we're stuck with daylight hours the way they are. And here in Kansas, where I'm at, the water temperatures are awfully cold or frozen. And so I will send them off to a pro for a couple of months over the winter time. And it's really just to continue on with where I'm at with the dog, so that the dog is getting to continue to advance, rather than sitting at home with me for 2 or 3 months when we couldn't be doing much.
yeah,
Um, now, once the dog gets to an advanced level, I may not do that, because I can get them back. I can get them back to a high level fairly quickly, in February and March, before really a lot of competitions really get going anywhere. But you can't do that with a dog that you're still trying to get to that level. So
yeah,
the rest of the year, for me, Chris, and an amateur like me that, is on my own a lot for stuff. I'm training just about every morning before I go to the office, whether it be, depending on the level of dog that I have. And generally for me, I only have 2 to 3 dogs. That's all I have time to do a good job with. I'd love to have more, there's so many good breedings out there, so many dogs that I like out there. But in being realistic with working a full-time job, and I only have time to do a good job with 2 to 3, so that's all I ever have. Right now in my kin, for me, I have a 7 month old, and Blaze just turned 5, and I have an 8 year old, that just turned 8. For me, that's all I can handle, and try to do a good job with. And all of those are at different levels of training. Now the 8 year old and Blaze are at the advanced level, but my 7 month old puppy, obviously we got a lot of things we can be doing and working on, and there's a lot
You
of
got
that
a
stuff.
journey to go.
Yeah,
Yep.
and in fact, Journey is my puppy's name, is Journey.
Oh,
So
look at that. I
yeah,
didn't know
yeah,
that. So look
it sure
at
is.
that.
And we can do a lot of drills in my yard. I live in a rural location. I have about 2 or 3 acres around my homestead. The rest is wooded. But my yard is situated such that there are so many things that we can work on, before we go to the field and do marks and do different things like that. So I can take advantage of a lot of things with a dog at that level,
Yep.
but I'm training every morning. In the summertime, I'm doing every morning because it's daylight so early. I'm out, and I may even be going out to the field and doing field work, at least 4 mornings a week during the work week. And of course, every Saturday and Sunday, trying to get in a couple of sessions on Saturday and Sundays, and that's what I do pretty much year round. So.
Yep. Well, that's great. It sounds very similar to the schedule I've had my whole life, and I'm really. I mean, this is just me personally. I started a new job. I think I've talked about this a few times on the podcast. That's remote,
Mhm.
and I'm also so I had a house that I was going to buy that had very like just under 3/4 of an acre, and it wasn't that much, but I was like, I can do tea and I can do a little things. Well,
Mhm.
that for a long story short, I had to walk away from that house a few days after the closing date because of some water issues at the well that they didn't disclose. And I was pretty bummed out about it, and I was like, man, I was really excited about that opportunity to be able to on my lunch break, which and I was walking into my backyard and
Yeah.
doing a little bit of drill work. Well, my wife and I found this other house that we made an offer on, and it's a very strange situation. It's right in downtown of this downtown, but it has this flag lot on it, and it's almost 2 acres of a perfect mowed grass field in the backyard. And it's incredible. It's not bowed the wrong way; it's bowed the right way. And I was like, man, I could put a little swim by pond back here, and I could. And my buddy Josh, who works in a bunch of different fields, was like, yeah, you're not gonna afford or want to do that. But I was like, come on, man. And he's like, you're gonna have puppies like every like 3 years, and you use your swim by pond for like that amount of time. Is it really worth it? And I'm like, probably not. But either way, I'm hoping like that we made an offer, and I haven't heard of it was on the market for a little bit, so I don't think there's any other offers, and so they're just waiting. But I was like, when I walked in the back of that field and I looked, and I was like, because I was just thinking like it's going to be like all hilly in the wrong ways or something that it's like really not usable. But I was like, oh, it's perfect. so,
Well, hey, you
so
can
I'm super stoked.
you can set that up where you can put strategically put decoys here or there.
Oh, uh,
You can find a log or a couple of
oh
hay
man,
bales and put out
yep.
there.
I'm
You can, yeah,
you're.
and
I
you
went.
can get a lot of stuff done and not leave home.
Oh,
It's a
I
big
know.
time saver.
It could be I could make a lot of really good little puppies out of that place. I think one of these year or each summer, maybe, or spring, I'll let it grow up, and I'll see if I can pay somebody to bale it for me to give me 4 or 5 bales.
Yeah.
And then I can mow cover strips in it for the grand. I'm like, I can do a lot of little things for it, but I'm really hoping it works out. My wife doesn't want to, like, I mean, I'm willing to pay what they're asking, but she doesn't want it. So I gotta like work her up to it. So we went a little, I don't want to say we lowballed them, but we made a pretty Rudd friendly offer. So we'll see. But I can drive my ATV on it. I was like, holy cow, this could be like game
Well, hope
changer. So,
that might turn out for you. Where I live at, I live, again, I live in a rural location, but I can hop on my Polaris Ranger, and, I can have access to quite a few things. That's another thing, guys like us, we don't have access to the necessary grounds you need to really develop a retriever to the highest level. So you really have to, and I talked about this on another podcast, you really have to, beg, borrow, and steal, not steal, but you know what I'm saying. Uh, Grounds, drive around and find places that offer opportunities to do certain things on. And I've been doing this for a long time now, so I have been able to get access to a lot of different places. Some of them really close to the house, and some of them I have to hop in the vehicle and drive 30 or 40 minutes to. And I've lost some great pieces of ground over time where, someone passes away, and the place sells to somebody else, and you lose your access, and different things like that. But it really does, again, we're at a disadvantage by not having, those type of grounds to play with. I don't have that stuff in my backyard. I've had to hustle to come up with
Yep.
good places to be able to do certain things on, and it's been really fun. And I've told this story before too. I can't tell you, it's happened several times that I knock on a door. People don't know me at all, and I try to explain to them what I'm doing and can I train on their pond, because you'll see a little piece of land that juts out in it where you can just envision a down the shore blind, and you have to be able to, just stay skinny in the water and yet get on that little piece of land and go on and do, something else. But they've told me, okay, I'll let you train on it, but I better not ever catch you fishing. It's no problem. Uh,
Yep.
but
That's good. That's real good. Well, Mike, I love this conversation. It's gonna be good. All right, let's transition into some drills. So, um, I think both of you and I are big drill guys. Like I mean, I probably
Mhm.
do drills over 50% of the time. For every setup I do, I'm probably doing at least one drill, um, in line with that. So especially when they're younger. I mean, when they're younger, it's probably more 3/4 drills and 1/4 setup. But anyway, I know you're a big drill guy, so tell me some of your or what is your favorite drill? Maybe you can't even say that because like I have a favorite drill based on what my dog's doing. But
Right, right.
but tell me, let's unpack a good drill that you like.
Well, first of all, philosophy on drills. I'm a big teacher. I think you have to teach these dogs. You can't just expect them to do things. You have to teach them what you want them to do, and then they grow from that and learn from that, and they learn to make decisions on their own then at that point in time. But maybe it goes to my old sports days or what have you, but to break down what appears to be a difficult task and break it down into small pieces and work on those small pieces, that when you put all that together, makes a difficult task all of a sudden become routine. And so, but one of my favorite go-to drills, and I'm sure there's a name for it, Chris. I didn't invent this stuff. But something that I do that's a staple in my training forever, and no matter what level the dog, especially once they get to the when they get to the handling stage, and I call it a V drill. And I'm sure that there's somebody that's way ahead of me in this game that's been doing this for a million years and what have you. But my philosophy is left and right hand backs when you're doing blinds, because to me, if I have to give an overcast, I've let my dog get so far offline, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
And so for me, everything's about a left and a right hand back. And so I set them down at the bottom of the V, and I have piles of bumpers, at the top of each V. And I want to, my goal was to be able to set them down and give them a left hand back or a right hand back, and then carry that line uh, extreme distance, 200 yards, because I've always felt like if I had to run a 500-yard blind in a super retriever series, and I could do that in three whistles, I would probably be sitting pretty good. And so at one time I had access to a field that had two natural landmarks out there that I put bumpers at, and I would ride my four-wheeler out there, put the bumpers down, bring the dog back, sit them, right in the middle, and either give them a left hand and I would back away from them and give them a left or a right hand back. And they get pretty good at it after a while, to where when you give that cast, they'll carry that line. My mission was to carry that line, carry that cast for a long way, at least carry that one cast 100 yards. And again, if I could do that and give the next cast, and then, again, after a while, they get savvy to it. And so you start throwing in some curveballs to them. I may cast them back to the left pile, and when they get part way there, stop them and then make them go to the other one, when they thought they were going to the left one. I do a lot of poison bird work off that same thing. I may put go out there and throw a mark, and then, sometimes it's under the arc, sometimes it's on the outside of the the wind blowing the scent right toward the line they would be taking. But I use that same V drill piece to carry that line no matter what else is going on. And well, even sometimes, and again, I'm sure there's terminology for it, and I learned this from Stephen Durrance that sometimes when they've picked up what they believe is the last bumper and coming back with it, I'll stop them and cast them back. I'll cast them, do some discipline casting with them, and cast them around with that bumper in their mouth. But that's probably my one of my favorite drills that I stay with in a dog's life forever, because to me and I will even do it to where once I set them at the bottom of that V, maybe I back up where I'm 50 to 100 yards from them, not just 20 yards from them, because again, distance, erodes control out there, and I'll put myself farther away from them to see if I can still get the same cast and the same line. So that's probably one of my favorites that I never get away from, and I don't do it every day, with them or anything like that, but it's something that I revisit and do often,
Yeah.
and it's probably similar to people using their pattern blind fields that I've heard a lot of guys talk about, and they are always, I used to always ask Lyle, and that's another thing I compliment pros on in our sport. Um, Being my situation how it is, and there's a lot of guys in my situation out there. I've never had any of the pros. I love the weekends when I get to go spend the weekends with the guys at the SRS, because I am spending as much time around them as I possibly can, trying to learn from them. Because I'm sitting here standing over one or two dogs a day, and they're standing over 10, 20, 10 or 20 or 25, 30 dogs a day that from all different backgrounds and everything like that. So, what they're facing on a daily basis is, what I face, I'd have to train for a week, to face what they face in one day, and, so I'm trying to learn from them, and I've never had any of those guys ever. They've been so good to answer questions and pick up the phone and call them, and they'll answer questions and tell me something to help me. And so kudos to them, because even I'm competing against some of their guys from their side and their clients and everything like that. They've never been anything but cordial to me, and I'm sure that they're probably that way with everybody, but they're a great resource, and I would tell people in my boat to utilize that as much as possible, because they've they offer a lot of good information, and I can't. There's no shortcut to experience. There just simply is no shortcut. And I have people ask me all the time, "Hey, how do you do this? How do you get a dog?" And I say, there's simply no shortcut. You're going to either spend a lot of time or a lot of money, and the reality is probably both. There's no shortcut. There's no way around
Yeah.
it. You
Yep.
simply can't do it. And so.
So with your V drill, are you? I'm sure. Well, are you identifying those for them, or you said natural markers? Um, what does that look like?
I don't use. I've never used white buckets. I've never used white blind poles for doing this drill, because I may be wrong in this, but I don't like the dog to have that white as a crutch. I want them to be able to go the way that I tell them to go. And so early on, I would identify the pile, for them when I'm first teaching that. But
Are you doing that with they're sitting at the bottom of the V and you're walking over and tossing a bumper to that spot?
yes,
So it's more
yes,
like a memory mark. Okay, but
yes,
they don't have
yep.
the visual crutch of a of that white pole. Got it.
Correct. I don't have a mode path, or anything like that. And and I will do this in different field. Once they get more advanced at it, I will do this in different locations. I will do because I will do it. I have my home field that I do that on when I first teach it. But as they become very proficient at it, and then they learn that I've sat them down at the bottom of the V, and I've either walked, or I've driven an ATV out there and put the bumpers down. They've seen where I've driven to and I've come back to, and what have you. And I don't do this with pressure. There I don't you don't teach any dog with pressure. You know, but they they come pretty proficient at it. Then I will do it in a different location. But it's the same concept, but I'm doing it in a different location. And there's where you can really tell, are they taking my cast and carrying it for a long way. And once they've gone out there one time, it's like, I know what I'm doing now, and they start doing that. But at the end of the day, what I've achieved with that is them taking a good left or right hand back cast and giving me a few degrees, correction on their angle back, and carried that line for a long way. And that was my whole goal and purpose for doing it. Is to carry a cast for a long way.
Yeah, it's
And again,
almost
my
like the
philosophy's
concept.
always
Oh, go
been,
ahead.
I was going to say, my philosophy's always been, if I don't do a whole lot of overwork, because if I have to give an overcast, I've probably allowed them to get so far offline, we're in trouble.
Yeah,
So
I got two questions for you. So well, maybe one's more of a question statement. It seems like you're almost doing this like a lining drill, but it starts with a cast. Is
it
that
starts with
fair?
a cast. That is fair. Yes.
Yeah.
And
So
and
go ahead, because
and
your
the other
goal is
thing
not
I
to
was going to tell
handle
you,
them
drill
at all.
wise,
Yeah.
yeah. Now the other drill that you talked about that I love to do, and I do an awful lot of, is wagon wheel alignment drills. I love to have the ability and I liken it to a scope on a rifle. I want to be able to adjust where they're looking, or lined up, just one click at a time. I don't want them to go, a whole bunch of clicks at a time. And again, that takes time. And I do an awful lot of wagon wheel aligning drills in my yard too. Again, something when I don't have a whole lot of time to do, I can go out in the yard and do an alignment drill, and I can get creative with that to do it different ways, because I love to have the ability to be able to just change their way of thinking, the way they're lined up, the way they're looking, just one click at a time. And if just like shooting a rifle, if you're off a couple inches at 50 yards, think how far you're going to be off at 200 or 300 yards. So again, especially in the Super Retriever Series game, I want to burn the least amount of whistles as I can. So getting them lined up right, and getting them everything started off correctly is a big part. And then if they'll carry that line for a long way, you're going to be in decent shape. So
That's
I do
great.
a lot of work with that.
So let's go to the very beginning of your wagon wheel.
Hmm.
Um, what does that progression look like? And let's try to get as nitty gritty as we can. So like I'm doing this with Clark's dog right now, and I'm not doing a full wagon wheel where there's four. I'm just doing 3/4 of a wagon wheel with three
Hmm.
poles. But talk to me about how you're doing that from the okay. Your dog has just come off of, I don't know, tea or something close
Hmm.
to that probably. So what does that look like? Like how far are they? How separate are they? How are you? Then how do you
Well,
work to that start ticking that rifle scope in?
very, very, very simply, when I'm starting it out, if you can picture, me and the dog are on the pitcher's mound, and I've got a bumper at first, second, third base, and home plate. So typical north, south, east, west type setup. They're that far apart, and I want them to be able to, to be able to turn with me and look at the bumper that is out there now. And again, so that I can get a lot of repetitions in without tiring them out. And typically, when I'm doing this, is with a fairly young dog, to start things out with. So, and I'm going to be coming up on this, to be honest with you, pretty quick with my 7-month-old. We're getting close to finishing the double T, and we're going to be getting into this phase with her before too long. But it's that simple, and I like to go one time around by making all of our moves to the clockwise and then counterclockwise, so they learn to go both directions with it. And in my opinion, that's where they really start to learn a lot of your verbal cues. Because I tell people all the time, and it's this way in sports too. Um, there is so much communication going on between teammates in any kind of ball game that the average fan will never see or never hear. But it's going on constantly. One of the ones everybody knows about is between pitcher and catcher, and the catcher giving signs. But the middle infielders are relaying those same signs. Sometimes out to the outfielder, because if you have a pitcher's throwing a changeup, you may have an idea that he's going to be a little ahead of the ball, and it might be more apt to go a certain direction. The center fielder can't give away his direction too quickly, or the batters start to get pretty, quick to that too, or coaching staffs do, to say, hey, right at the last minute, I saw him shift 2 steps one way. But bottom line is that's a form of communication that's nonverbal, and with the dogs, it all, that nonverbal communication as well as verbal communication starts a lot with wagon wheel, of trying to get them to move with you and change directions with you. And so it's the beginning of that process, and that it's a fun thing. And, I've said this before too, that I love training puppies and everything up through that intermediate stage, because you see progress almost every single training session, and that's fun. Um, when it gets to a highly advanced level, you may work months. I may work all summer on working on something that would make us better, and that those pieces of progress come in tiny little bits, and they're very, very hard earned. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people don't stick with it there, because that's when it starts to get boring. That's when you've got to really be creative, and you've got to really stick with things to gain some progress. But uh so that wagon wheel is how I would start out with me at home plate, and we're doing big turns, and when the
Yep.
dog becomes pretty proficient at that, I'll start sticking the bumper in between them. And distance wise, I'm only throwing them out there because I want to do a lot of repetitions. I'm only throwing them out there, maybe 10, 15 yards from the line, because I'm not worried about them going the distance at that point. I'm just concentrating on them being lined up right and going the right direction. We'll be able to add distance later on as they get all of that out there, as you start to get into, pattern blinds and my V drill, and things like that, but for right now, it's just learning to go the direction you're pointed, and learning to line up in the right direction. I've run into a little battle with my 8-year-old dog that somehow I've created, that I don't know how I've created it. And this is a dog that I ran in 4 derbies. She ran 4 derbies in her career. She got a first, a third, and 2 jams. She won a 34 dog qual. I've got every placement you can get in the SRS but a win with her. And all of a sudden, we've hit a patch where I get about 2 tries to line her up correctly, and she's going to start bugging and no-going on me, looking up at me like, "What do you want?" And I'm trying to fix that right now, but I love that drill, and I come back to it no matter how advanced things are. And again, it's one of those little things I can do when I don't have a whole lot of time. I can do 2 or 3 legs of an alignment drill just to revisit, even with that older, more advanced dog, to say, you got to continue to work with me here. Hey, when I'm moving around here at the line and I'm doing this and that, we're not doing dance moves. We're doing this for a reason, and I want to make sure we're still on board and on the same page with things. So,
Yeah. Well, we can go really crazy deep into this. So, it sounds like that first initial four bases that you're talking about is
mhm,
really about, almost in a sense, like healing with you,
mhm,
and then spine alignment, and
correct.
then it's more about the dog. This is my opinion of this. When I'm teaching this part, I'm thinking of, how do I get the dog to sit properly and understand that this alignment means this is the direction you're going, because their life up until this point, you're kind of trying to point them at the mark,
Yeah.
but really, the mark goes off and they might watch it. And if your dog sits good, and they might be turned slightly, and then they go get it.
Right.
I'm not a re-heel for every mark. Like, there are certain field trialers that will re-heel their dog before they send on the go bird. That's not what I do. I don't think you do that.
No.
Like, if you're swinging a gun, and so the dogs are getting marks with their heads not positioned correctly with their spine, quote unquote, correctly.
Right.
But this is the first time that they're truly getting that repetition of you heel with me, you sit down, your spine is lined up, and then your head is pointed straight down your spine, or everything's in line, and then I'm saying back. And that's the first stage of having a dog that lines well, is them to begin to understand that when I'm going through the cues for a blind, which will eventually translate into memory bird marks, but for now let's just talk about blinds. You're getting that gross, the gross correction of not correction of change to where you want that dog to go. Now, how do you transition into what I'm going to call those micro adjustments, where the spine is lined up pretty stinking good, and now you're just trying to get that dog to look, the 3 to 4 degrees to the right or left? How do you teach that?
Well, again, it's just one of those attrition. More than anything, it's attrition, and I will start putting those bumpers in between. I will start using orange bumpers and maybe throwing them out 20 yards instead of 12 to 15 yards. They're a little farther. I also have a couple little drills that I will do when they start to get advanced at this. And again, I'm sure there's a name for it, Chris, but I don't know what it is. But if you could picture that I would place a bumper, out here about 20 yards away, and I'm putting them in line, almost like, how do I best describe this? Almost like rungs on a ladder,
Mm-hmm.
And at first, maybe I'm over at a 45-degree angle away from those bumpers, and I can see their head look at, say, the closest bumper number one, but I want them to go to bumper number two. And so I start patting my leg a little bit until they turn their head, because they can visibly see them. They're not hidden. They can visibly see them. And when their head turns to look at that next bumper, I cue them and say, good, right there, good, right there. And I send them, and they go get the right one. Now, if they get out there and they start to pick up the wrong one, I simply blow the whistle and cast them to the right one. And then as soon as they come back, I toss the bumper back out there to that same spot. And so we still have, say, 4 or 5 rungs on the ladder there, bumpers 1 through 5. And now I might switch and go all the way down to the end and pick up number 5 next, where they got to, we're still at a 45-degree angle, let's say,
Yep.
and the same verbal cues. When they look at the right one, I say, good, right there. And you kind of see them lock on, and then you touch them off and you send them to it, and eventually you start changing that angle. When they start to get proficient at that, you can start to change that angle to where it's pretty tight. I mean, again, we're only talking about bumpers that are 10 to 20 yards away. Think of what that
Yep.
would be like if it was way out there. But I love to do that as well. And again, it's me and my dog communicating together that you're not looking at the right one. Now you are looking at the right one. Go get that one,
Yep.
and again, they will become pretty darn good at it,
Yep.
but it takes time. You just can't rush through this stuff. It just simply takes time. But I love these little drills because there are things I can do in my yard when I've only got 10 or 15 minutes. And I've even been out here. I have over the years, I've put some pretty good lights around my house that are pretty bright LED
Yep.
lights, and I would almost liken it to stadium lights.
Yep.
I've been many a night, or early morning with the stadium lights on in my yard and doing these kind of drills. And then later on, we start to do the same things, only you're doing that and you're jumping over a log and going doing it, or you're jumping over a couple little square hay bales, little hay bales, going over and doing it. We're doing the same thing through decoys or around decoys. All the other little props we get in, we start to implement those with the same drills so that those things don't blow their mind. We're still doing the same old fundamental thing we've been working on. I'm throwing in a few things here to distract you, and Let's keep the fundamental still the fundamental. We're still just doing an alignment drill or a simple little lining drill. You're looking at the right bumper I want you to be looking at, and I touch you off and let you go. And again, it just takes time, and it's fun to see them grow into that. But at the same time, you're developing a little level of communication with you and your dog that you both understand right there. That's the spot, or no, that's not
Yep.
it. Keep working with me here,
Yep. And I
And
think that's really good. I think, like, just to, in a sense, summarize what you're saying, or maybe talk about what I think the dog is processing when they're going through that is they're seeing one that they want. Like your description was bumper number one, which is slightly to the left. You
Mhm.
said no, not here, not there. They subconsciously noticed your hand tapping your leg. They look to the other one, the one you wanted. Good, back. They associate those little cues that you're doing to that change of their head movement. And I wanted to like really slow down and talk about that for 1 second, because for I think some of the listeners is that it's hard, their first or maybe their second dog. I just want everybody to realize it's those subtle little cues that the dog doesn't notice yet. But then the next thing right after that cue happens is the success that they're looking for and that you're looking for. That's when those cues start to mean something through time and, as Mike said, attrition. So
That's
I
right.
think that's really, really, I'm glad that we slowed that down, because I don't think I've heard too many people talk about that little, like that, all those little things that lead up to those cues making sense for those dogs.
Yeah. And again, Chris, it's a great point. And when you get to a high level, a lot of dogs are so good. There are so many great dogs out there and great handlers out there. There are so many, and you had better really, really, really pay attention to all the little details, because when things are that tightly compacted in competition, with that many, good teams out there, it's going to come down to some little things, and you cannot overlook those little things. You have to, and they're so easy to overlook, and they're a boring aspect of dealing with things. But man, it's paying attention to those details that in the long run will make a big difference, and that's why I love doing it. Maybe part of because I am an amateur, and I still work a full-time job, and all these other things. Time has forced us to do some of these piddly things maybe more than others would, there's where sometimes maybe an amateur, and I've heard the pros talk about this sometimes. If they got 24 dogs on their truck and they're going to get 2 sessions in today, and they have an issue with one, they don't have a whole lot of time to sit there and work through that issue with that dog during that session, because they've got others they need to get to. But guys like me, we can sit there and point our finger at that and repeat that several times until we think the dog understands what's going on before we go to the next dog or do something like that. So there's some things we have some advantages at, along with plenty of disadvantages. But I love all those little details of the game like that become super important. It just becomes super important.
Yeah. Well, I had a couple listeners ask me to talk about flow charts every once in a while so that they understood the progression of how something's taught. And so I think maybe this would be a good time to kind of talk about each of our little flows. Um, Going through the stage that we're talking about is you said aligning to lining drills. And so I'll do mine, since we kind of talked a little bit about yours, which mine is almost identical to yours. And you didn't really unpack yours too much, so I want to give you the opportunity to talk about what types of drills you do through that process. But when I'm doing aligning, I start in the same way with a wagon wheel. I just don't have the one behind me. I want them to be able to move right and left, and I figure with 3 I can get enough of that. And
Yep.
then what I do is I move to that same drill where I line up. I try to line up 6 to 7 bumpers at a 45-degree angle, and I teach them to go to the farthest one first, and I start there, and I don't put that bumper back yet. I have them pick that far bumper up. That it's a hand thrown bumper. It's maybe the farthest one is 30 yards, and the closest one's 15. but they
Hmm.
pick up them longest to shortest. And as soon as I feel like I can do that really well, then I do it accomplishing, I believe, the same thing that you're accomplishing with the way you do it, but I just throw them out randomly, like completely random. And I just do through denial or like resend denials. I just have them pick up all different types of bumpers in different configurations, probably 6 to 7 bumpers a session, where one can be at 5 yards, one can be at 20, as far as I can throw it.
Hmm.
And I spread them out as much as I can. And then the reason I like to do it that way is because I can always go back to my Hillman 7 bumper lining drill. And if I feel like the dog is not honoring the hard, you know, whether that's mentally staying in the water in a water blind or going through a piece of covers, like I go back to that lining drill and say, hey, you always need to be thinking the hard one first. And that's why I like to do that progression that way.
Yeah. We're very similar in that stack, except I always throw the bumper back because I want the same set of items out there as I'm trying to get them to focus on the other ones. Because if I take one off the table, now they got a 1 in 4 chance of being right. And that time we get a next one, they got a 1 in 3 chance of being
Yep.
right. So I want them to have the 1 in 5 chance every time. To really to understand it. And again, I don't. A lot of this stuff, I don't think it's your method or my method is better than the other. It's you learn lots of. I think the process is the same that we're all
Yep.
trying to go through, and the way that some of us get there maybe is a little different. And sometimes, it's nice to know different processes because what works for this dog may not work for the next dog, and
Yep.
so having the ability to modify that a little bit to end up with the same success. I think that's where the good trainers are at. There are some trainers out there that I think are really, really, really good at what they do, but they only do things one way. And if you get the dog that fits that mold really well, they thrive with that trainer and do really well. But if you get for me, I get a 6 week old puppy. I've had one started dog in my life, and that was the first one I ever bought back in 1982 when I don't even know if I could spell started. And so you know. Um, so everything I've had since then has been a 6 week old puppy. And so by the time we get a year or 2 years into a dog with all the time and effort we've put into it to figure out that this dog's not going to make it, we've wasted 2 years of our life trying to get there. So that's why, to me, studying and learning as much as you can learn to try to, because failing's not an option. That sets me back 2 years in my life of everything we're doing to start over with another puppy. So failing's not an option. So I want to learn all I can learn to go at it different ways until it finally clicks for them.
Yep.
So
We all got to
um,
be students of the game. I mean, that's the intro on this podcast every time. And it's true. Like, I love watching other trainers go through, their problem childs, because I know, like, one is I can identify it quicker because I've now seen it as possible.
mhm,
Knowing that it could happen is winning the battle to some degree, right? And then knowing if you get into that situation, how do you handle it?
right.
So I can totally appreciate that, and I think that's what makes this whole game fun. Is that even if I'm not learning about what maybe my particular dog is that I'm campaigning right now or training right now, but I can see what my buddy's dog might need some help with, or that's what I think is cool. And if you talk like with Clark, he's like, there's times where having that problem child is the one that makes your day the most interesting. He
Yeah.
says, I don't want a lot of them, but I don't mind a
Yeah.
few of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Well, it keeps your day interesting for sure. And I can promise you that probably as many people as you talk to about this stuff, all of our dogs are problem childs at some point or another, or on something or another. No matter what their accolades have been or anything else. We live with those dogs every day and have trained them every day since they were a baby, and it's just like raising our own kids. That we might turn out some awfully good kids, but it didn't mean we didn't have a lot of some problems along the way. And you
Yep.
have to work. You have to work through them. And work through them and come out of there with the best attitude too. That's still another key to this thing. Having attitudes in the right place. So you know
Yeah,
that's
that's
what
been
makes it
something that's
fun.
yeah, absolutely. Well, what about what other drills you got? You got one more good one?
Well, let me think about that for a second. Yeah, I do have another one that I love to do, and I'll share that in just a second. But all of the same things we're talking about, I repeat and do the same thing on water. Now, I
Yeah.
don't necessarily do an alignment drill on water, but I do the V drill on water. I do the V drill on water often. Now, obviously, I can't do it. I don't set them out there at 100 to 200 yards because you can't get many repetitions doing that. And the key to that whole thing is getting that good initial line and that good initial cast, and hopefully experience carries you a long way with it. But I do the same thing on water, and again, that becomes more complicated, as you know. Uh, but another drill that I do an awful lot of, and it's a water drill, and I suppose it's okay to mention other people's names, and I think highly of this guy is Stephen Durrance, and I learned this drill from him. But it's basically to seek more water, and no matter what size of pond I have to work with, and I'll see some that are better than others for it, but I will put it's much like that ladder drill that we just talked about on land. That I'll do it down the shore, and start off with a close one, and then we go to one, but I never do the long one first. I want the dog to seek more water, and I want them to take more water when they're the most tired, so the last one we go get is the one is either all the way to the corner of the pond, or I scoot over and change my angle that it's basically a down the parallel to shore all the way and swimming past the other 2 or 3 piles of bumpers that's laying there. And it is, so we went and got bumper number one, which would basically maybe just cut the corner of the pond. And we went and got bumper number two, which was down the shore a little ways. And we went and got bumper number three, which is down the shore even farther. And then we go get bumper number four, which is either all the way in the corner, or it's even past the corner a little bit where you're going parallel to shore. But I always do that one in order. Start off with the close one and work my way, because when they're tired, no matter what, I want them to always be seeking more water. When there's that decision of land or water, I want it to be water, and so that's a water drill that I love doing, and I do it. It stays with me year round. It's just one of the staples in our training. When I
Yep.
sometimes you just go out, and it's not about running a big old, complicated blind with poison birds and this and that and the other. It's just, I'm a big believer in fundamentals. I try to be as fundamentally sound as possible, and hope that that's good enough to handle anything that they throw at us, is that we can remember our training and be fundamentally sound. I don't do a lot of crazy, wild setups. I just don't do much of that. I just believe in being as fundamentally sound as we possibly can, and then hopefully the dog's talent and no matter what they do works. And that's just one of the things I consider a fundamental, it's something I'll start just as soon as my puppy can handle on water a little bit. We'll start doing that thing, that's something I'll do the rest of our life.
Yep.
And
Yeah. So that I've seen Durance has I think I've talked about this on the other on other podcasts, but I think they're actually split between YouTube and Vimeo. So you might have to dig a little bit. At some point, I want to put them all into a document and make it available for folks. But when Steven and Jake did that, I don't know if it was a podcast or video cast, whatever they called it, where
yep.
he went through his water fundamentals, was one of the best things that I've ever watched. And so if you're listening to this, you can still find it. I don't remember if they had a name for it or anything, but you can find it if you dig hard enough. And he talked about this, and I thought it was really interesting because I talked to Dan about this for a while. Hillman does it the opposite way. Hillman starts with the furthest bumper and works his way in. Durrance did it the other way. But what I noticed is, and I wanted to ask him about this, but you might know the answer, so I'll ask you. So Hillman does it at very short distances, and it's more about a lining drill at that point. He's just saying, "Hey, I'm going to line you, and I don't want to cast you. If I cast you, in a sense, he's failed the purpose of the drill with the lining drill." And that's why he picks up the furthest one, because that's the most tempting one to bail on your line. Versus Durance's drill, I felt like he was teaching a young dog in transition when the dog that he was explaining it with
Hmm.
and it was more about casting towards water than it was necessarily about lining. Is that fair? Like, is there a little truth to that? That it's
No, I think what Stephen was trying to do and teach Jake and his young dog Tanner was to teach them to again, it's lining drill, but go the way you're taught, go toward that bumper, but at the same time it was the next bumper. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to swim past that bumper and go to the next bumper in line, and then we're going to turn and go to the third bumper in line, and then eventually we're going to turn and go past all those
all of them.
bumpers, all of
Yeah.
them, and go all the way to the end. And that's when the dog is tired. They've already made multiple swims. They obviously would like to go into the bank. It's obviously an easier route to go is go into the bank. And Stephen, even, you may not notice it in that. I don't remember every step of that all the way, but it ain't just get your feet dry. If you get your feet touching bottom, you're
Yep.
you're going to be in trouble, because this thing is about staying in the water until it's time to get out. And some dogs would hug over and scoot over. They might still be in the water, but their feet's touching bottom. And they
Yep.
think they're okay, and that's not okay. And
Yep.
I think Hillman's drill. Again, it goes back to this thing, Chris. Lots of people have different ways of doing things, and they each achieve something different, and a lot of times they each achieve something similar, just a different way to go about it. But Stephen's philosophy, I think, behind all that is seek more water. No matter what, you stay in the water until it's time to get out, and at the end of the deal, you're swimming past two or three piles of bumpers that you've already picked up a bumper. You're tired, and it would be easy just to dart over there and get one and make you happy. But no, that's not the case. You need to go after the one I'm telling you to go after, and don't give in to the temptations, A, the shoreline, and B, the bumper pile that's there. Stay the course with where you were pointed and go to, you know.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I like it because it's about seek more water. When you're the most tempted to get out, it's seek more water.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And as the dogs get through that initial short lining, I do it the exact same way.
Yeah.
And what I like about, and it's interesting because Hillman's, he does it that way, but then he throws his marks in the same fashion that you're talking about, where he actually he'll put, like, let's say he's teaching a cheating single to a dog that's already done a bunch of them, but they're
Mhm.
getting to the point where it's ready. He'll put 3 white bumpers between where that mark is going to land and the hide. So, and then that bumper that he throws will be an orange one that they can't see. And it's the same exact concept of what Durance is doing, is that they're making it very clear that there's a lot of friendly things that if you just get out early, you'll get. And teaching a dog to do that drill, that I think he calls it a focus drill or something.
Mhm.
Man, that when I started doing that, that was one of the best drills that I started to do, was to make that shore so tempting that it was there. It was undeniable that they understood that when they started to do it right, that they understood the concept of stay in the
Yep.
water.
Stay in the water. Stay,
S-
don't give in to the temptation. Hillman puts a lot of temptations out there. The shore being a natural temptation, but then you turn around and put white bumpers there to boot, and it's stay focused on the one you're supposed to be going after. Don't cave into the temptations. And again,
yeah,
all of them's good drills. And that's where, you get to this stuff again. Programs like what Hillman's is and what you're doing, a lot of people's doing out there is great for people like myself, because again, I don't have that pro sitting here 20 minutes away from me that I can go train with every day and learn these things. So these become tools to us who want to become better at what we're doing. These all become tools to us to utilize and do. And so it's all great. And to your point, you've picked up some things from Hillman, you've picked up some things from Durance, you've picked up some things from Clark, lots of different people, and you've put them together to build your own success. And the beauty of that is you've learned different ways to do different things. And again, I guarantee you it's already happened to you. I know the fact that this method didn't work for this dog, but this other method that I saw him do, I did that and he picked up on it and it worked. So you still get to the same end result. You went a little different route to get there.
yep,
But at the end of the day, the process is all the same. And that's what's so fun, is this journey and the process, the ribbons, the trophies, the whatever, the accolades that come with it sometimes. that's all okay. But yeah, at the end of the day, I just really enjoy the process, and what I really enjoy about it, it all goes back to when I first started. When I got out, my always wanted a lab our whole life, and I finally was able to get one. If how many guys do you know, Chris, that they go to? I know me personally, and I'm not a professional trainer. Um, I get 5 or 6 phone calls every year, starting in about August and September, about, hey, do you have a started dog, or do you know where one's at? I went to get old Rough out of the kennel. Start to get him in shape a little bit for dove season or duck season, and he's just gotten too old on me, and I need a dog that I can have to go hunting with right now. Those people don't do anything with their dog 9, 10 months out of the year, and they only do something with them 2 months out of the year during a hunting season. Getting involved with the hunt test game, or the field trial game, or the SRS, or any of the retriever games like that, I love all of them. They're so good. I enjoy every bit of them. But it forces me, and B, allows me to do something cool with my dog year round, not just 2 months during hunting season. I'm getting to enjoy my dog year round, and that's one of the probably the coolest things about it, I think. And I think also, you take two kids that both have the exact same IQ, and you put them in kindergarten at the same time, and one only goes to class 1 day a week and the other one goes to class 5 days a week, in a real short amount of time, which one's going to appear to be a whole lot better than the other one, or a whole lot smarter than the other one. And the truth of the matter is, they're both equally smart. Just one is getting a chance to grow his smarts and enhance everything, and one isn't. And I think when you start teaching these dogs at a young age how to learn, just like a young child, when they first start to learn to read and things like that, they thrive on it. They want more of it. And I think if you do these dogs the same way, you start teaching them how to learn at a young age, they can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
And it just makes it fun. But it really, really, really allows me to spend time with my dog year round and do some cool things with them.
Yeah. And that's good stuff. And I love the puppy training, like just like you, because that light bulb just like it goes on all the time. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast, but I made a chart for any dog that I'm doing transition work, and what I try to do is 3 times 3, which is I want to do an obedience session. I want to do a control session, which normally is either lining or casting, and I want to do a marking session. And I want to do that 3 times, and I want to do obedience 3 times 3. So that's a terrible acronym or like little thing, like 3 times 3. But to me, it just makes sense that I need to do a really good obedience 3 times in a day, and I need to do at least one marking setup and one marking drill or something to work on marking and something to work on control. And with a puppy, that could be food bowl casting. With the marking can be, just working on, finding a bumper and a white bumper. It can be on those. But if you work on those every single day, those 3 things, and you do your obedience 3 times a day, by the time you're ready, and they're a year and a half to 2 years, if you do that, you're going to have a very solid dog that understands when a mark goes, it's his job to go find it. When it's a blind, it's you guys are a team. And when you're sitting at the line, you better have your obedience in place, and you better sit there like a little gentleman and do your job.
Yep.
If you work on those 3 things every day, you'll be in good shape.
Yeah, I get asked that question all the time, especially by not people not in the retriever game world, just friends of mine and people from my hometown. How do you get the dogs to do this and do that? And it's not. They think I spend 8 hours a day doing things with my dogs, and I don't. But I can tell you, I do spend every day with my dog doing something. And those a lot of those little 5 minute lessons, I can get through force fetch. I do. In all honesty, I get through force fetch usually in 2 to 3 weeks tops. But I'm doing it 4 times a day. They
Yep.
might be 4 5 minute to 10 minute sessions is all they are. But I'm doing it of a morning. First thing, I'm doing it on my lunch hour. I'm doing it as soon as I get home, and I'm doing it again before I go to bed. So they're getting 4 sessions a day of it. And I can go little bits at a time, but all those little bits add up. Over time they add up. It's not like I'm spending 4 hours a day doing force fetch, but
Yep.
I'm spending time with them every day doing something, and it adds up over time. It really, really adds up,
Yeah.
and that's the most important part, the consistency to stay with it and keep doing something every day. It's not that you have to have 3 or 4 hours at a time set aside to do something, but the key is something,
Yep.
every day,
Yep.
something, and they love it too. I mean, they beats the heck out of sitting out there in the pen, or, maybe you have them in a kennel in your house, or, different things like that. But it's that they enjoy doing something with you too.
Yep. They love it. That's great. Well, Mike, is there anything else that you feel like amateurs out there need to know? Well, I'm sure there's a lot, but just one more really good one.
Oh,
And if
one of the things that I do a lot, and you talked about your obedience with the puppies. One of the things that I've done for a long time, a lot of people will do an obedience session first, and then they kind of go into their marking or their field work or something. So they establish some sort of control, before they go into that next phase. I kind of like to do it the opposite. I like to get them as wound up as possible, and then immediately go into an obedience session. And that's because I feel like when I need to have the most control is when they're the most hyped up. And so I will purposely get them hyped up with little fun bumpers, or little things like that, and just a lot of hey, 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 and get them really wound up and just excited as all heck. And then immediately we go into a simple obedience session. And I like to do that. Again, my reasoning behind that, I don't know whether I'm right or wrong. It's just something that seems to make sense to me. When I need them to be at their best is when they're the absolute most hyped up. So that's how I don't teach obedience that way. Obviously, you got to learn the command sit first, and then, but once you definitely know that command, we're going to do that command after I get you so wound up that you can't stand it. And then I'm going to make you sit while I walk halfway across the yard, and throw a bumper, and I'm talking about puppies, something that I try to do is when I get a 6-week-old puppy, by the time they're 12 weeks old, they'll sit on a whistle, they'll heel, they will come on a whistle, and they will go into a kennel pretty darn good all by the time they're 12 weeks old. And that allows me to start on these other things with control. But then once they know those commands, I try to get them as wound up as I can, and then we rehearse them and review them.
Yep, that's
So that
good.
So I don't. It's worked for me. I don't know if it's the right way to do it or not, but that seems to be something that makes sense to me. So,
Well, how many times have you heard, man, my dog never does this in training?
oh yeah,
And
yeah,
it's because they're not hyped up yet. So you're right.
yeah,
You're absolutely right. I do the same thing. I'll often go through a little obedience session. I'll walk to the line. I'll throw the first mark. I'll let them pick it up. And then I'll have everybody just get set like we're going to do another mark. And then all of a sudden I start doing obedience with the dog, and I do obedience to retrieve, where maybe the bird almost comes from the judge, where I make them do obedience. And as soon as they do everything right, I make them sit. And then a bird comes from where they don't expect it.
yeah,
Just I try, like I do that a lot with young dogs.
yeah,
So yeah, I totally agree with exactly what you're saying. Well, hey
yeah.
Mike, man, this was awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I learned some stuff. I hope that you enjoyed sharing some information,
Sure.
and so I just appreciate you being on.
Well, I appreciate you having me. And again, these sessions like this, hopefully I have something out there that I can share with somebody that helps somebody, because I know that I've had a lot of people help me. So I hope that it helps somebody. And I appreciate you. Appreciate you having me on.
No problem, Mike. Thanks, man. Appreciate it again. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.